Okay, when I first saw Jeepers Creepers, I loved it up until the ending, at which point then I hated it. On subsequent watches, I actually kind of began to enjoy it more because of everything that made it good up to the last, 2 minutes. Essentially, you have... It kind of falls into the old-fashioned category of wrong place, wrong time. There's a demon that comes out roughly every 23 years for about 23 days. If I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've seen it. And essentially, when you see this demon, what it kind of does is it harvests body parts that it requires to essentially keep itself alive, as well as to replace any damaged body parts. That's a fairly interesting demon. Its lair is essentially full of, dead bodies. Those scenes are done excellently well. When it comes to the acting of, of your two main teenagers, they're actually fairly smart about it. In the fact that, as they learn about the creature, they actually try to, one, escape. Two, if they're going to try to attack it, it's normally to attack it to escape. And that comes off actually fairly smart. They don't come off as absolute idiots. Which is rare in a horror movie. Especially in the wrong place, wrong time horror movies. Now back to the demon itself. Sometimes he's out driving what looks like a beat-up truck. Different thing to do for a demon. Takes a while before it begins to fly. Yes, you might have a flying demon that whenever you deal damage to it, it begins to harvest the organs of other people to acquire the body parts that have been damaged. Yes, that's fairly complicated for a demon. It's not just go out and kill people, it's, oh man, you broke my arm, therefore I have to kind of steal the arm from somebody else and use it to attach my body. Done well, it's a unique concept that people are a little bit more likable than your regular everyday run-of-the-mill characters. Here's the part where I didn't like it. They use the song Jeepers Creepers, and it does a really great job. Except for the very, very ending, where'd you get those peepers? The demon gets his eyes damaged, towards the end of the movie. I believe this is when they're doing, I want to say they're at a police station, and there's kind of like a shootout against the demon with cops. Cops don't figure what this thing is, so they're unloading it as best as they can. And the teenagers are also, attacking it to try to escape this thing. And of course, it happens to capture, male teenager, and essentially tears the back of its head open. Why? With suffered eye damage. And Jeepers Creepers, where'd you get those peepers? That's how they end the movie. And then it goes to credits. When I saw it in theaters, everyone kind of looked at each other like, that's it? That's how it's going to end? It's going to end with the thing still being alive, not being defeated. It led directly into a sequel. And ironically, when you watch the first one and the second one, it makes a better coherent plot than one of them by themselves. That, of course, ends up being the problem when you essentially set up a first movie to be kind of like a prologue. It doesn't actually... if you look at an ending from the standpoint of, it killed one of the main characters. Yes, it was successful. Which is weird to see a horror movie where the bad guy actually kind of wins, as opposed to being defeated at the end of the movie. At first, that's what I didn't like about it. Thinking about it later, that's what actually makes the movie work. Is that you have a fairly tough enemy that's a demon that harvests body parts to recover its damage as well as essentially to gain immortality. And it really can't be easily beaten, except for by essentially waiting it out. That's actually a fairly unique idea for a villain. It's done well, it's got decent effects for the time. It's done creepy. It uses that song to a very great effect. And actually, it's a decent movie. I recommend probably seeing that one and probably the sequel in roughly a pretty close time frame. The sequel, not as good because it goes a little bit more cookie cutter than the first one. But when you watch them together, it actually makes for an overall better cinematic experience. And that's Jeepers Creepers. On its own, it's good, but it was going on all cylinders, and then all of a sudden it just kind of stopped. As a direct lead-in to the sequel. But when we first saw it, in people in theaters, you wouldn't have known they're going to do a sequel. You know, we're talking like before, oh, you can find out what movie's coming out in like 2 or 3 years from now. No, we really didn't think that this was one of those, you know, it's going to have, you know, sequels to it. So when I saw it again at a later time, essentially on DVD and then followed by Creepers Part 2, it actually worked better. So on its own, it's kind of like a prologue. With 1 and 2, it actually ends up being a fairly decently rounded out movie. With the first half, the original Creepers being done fairly well, and the second half being a little bit more cookie cutter with essentially more violence to it.